All right, so we're back here in our raspberry plots, and Forrest will tell us a little bit about what's going on here.
Okay, so this is a raspberry variety trial. It started off as that. We've kind of moved it into a fertilization trial this year. But initially what we were looking at is a bunch of different varieties and how well they responded in these high pH soil conditions. And we were modifying fertilization and irrigation to see how well we could maximize their production. What wound up happening, we had two different sort of propagation types in this plot. So these two first varieties here that you see in this row, Red Bounty and Red Mammoth, are varieties that came from the University of Saskatchewan. These ones were tissue culture propagated. So in tissue culture propagation, you grow plants in aseptic conditions. So they aren't grown in soil or in peat or anything like that. They don't start off that way. They start off in a media that's an agar, a gel agar, and they have all the nutrients that they need. And then the hormones are manipulated so that they grow. And usually what you're striving for is rapid propagation. So in tissue culture propagation, you get a lot of different plants from one source. So when you start off and you only have the one mother plant, you can propagate them so that you have millions after a very short period of time. These varieties both came from tissue culture. There's another thing that happens when you're doing propagation through tissue culture is that you're less susceptible to having viral diseases in the plants, or to bringing in different things from soil that negatively affect production over time. But in the first couple of years, these two tissue culture propagation varieties were slower to develop. So in the first year, we didn't get any production from Red Bounty or Red Mammoth. And so initially they were sort of the losers of the pile. The varieties that we have here, Prelude and Nova, were bare roots. So those ones were propagated via cutting and then just grown in the soil. So those are these two varieties here. They grew very rapidly, and we did get fairly significant production off of them in the first year. And in the second year, they still outperformed the Red Mammoth and the Red Bounty. So, you know, they did very well initially. This year, they're not doing as well, it seems, but they might catch up by the end of the season. Last winter, like 2017 into 2018, was very harsh. Like, it was a long winter, and in mid-March it warmed up a bit, and a lot of plants became susceptible to the later frost that came through, and raspberries were susceptible. So you can see what they call tip kill. You might want to zoom in on this. It's where the top of the plant died out, or it was winter killed. Just the conditions got too cold, or it was too dry, and they died. There's different ways of looking at it. You can spend the time to prune those out, but you do get growth underneath the dead tissue area. And you can see, for example, in this one that there is pretty good production coming from below the killed zone. So these ones might recuperate and give pretty strong yield. One of the things, this one is Prelude. Prelude was an interesting variety because it gave fruit initially right away, and then set up for a later production sort of mid-September and going right into sort of mid-October in that year. It was a warm year, but that was exceptional production for a crop that was just in for the first year, and it adapted very nicely. This is the third year, and obviously it was a little bit susceptible, but we've got good growth coming from the new shoots. So you can see, for example, this is what they call a primocane. Floricanes, they grow in a biennial fashion. So the first year they set up that primary cane, the primocane, and that one usually doesn't set fruit in that year. But in the next year, it will flower and set fruit. So that's the floricane in the second year. Some people in Saskatchewan are, you know, as opposed to going through and removing all of the dead or dying floricanes, that in the third year they're not going to be very productive. they'll just mow down the row, and then you'll get primocane growth, and then the next year you'll get production, but they don't have to do any of the cane removal.
But then you have that one year where you don't have any
where you don't get production. So what they're doing is just one row, then the next row they leave for production.
Okay.
So it reduces the labor costs,
Right.
and you maintain a fairly decent level of production. But with these, the Prelude, it's not really a primocane variety. It's still a floricane, but you're getting that consistent production. So this might be one that you could do in that way very nicely, because you get production potentially from the primocane. So anyway, those are those varieties. This one, again, we're seeing how well it's adapted to the high pH conditions. And I should mention about high pH, why it's a problem. Fruit crops usually like a pH, soil pH that's in the range of 6 to 7, somewhere around there. When you get above 7, it starts to limit the number of micronutrients that they can absorb. And of course, pH is on a logarithmic scale, so the more you go into that 8, it's multiplying by 10, the lack of availability. So what we get is what they call iron chlorosis, and it might not show up very nicely. I'll show you. Iron chlorosis is where you'll have green veins, but in between, it's interveinal, they don't have the green tissues. And so what happens is the plant can't absorb iron from the soil because of the pH, high pH, and then it can't transport it to the leaves. And iron is fundamental to the production of chloroplasts. So without iron, you're not getting the green chloroplasts that make up the green tissue on the leaf that collects sunlight. And then that reduces production. But we were trying to integrate different applications of iron products to see if we could overcome that high pH iron chlorosis.
Okay.
And so we applied foliar applications of iron chelates, and we also tried some products like iron sucrate and iron monohydrate as a soil application. It worked fairly well for the raspberries, I think, but we are seeing some bits of iron chlorosis.
So applying product again is something that
yeah. And for this year, I started applying, it's a different thing. We were using a 20-20-20 fertilizer, so the major nutrients would be nitrogen, phosphorus, potassium in that scheme, and then there isn't very much for micronutrients in those water-soluble 20-20-20 formulations. I tried a new variety now that's a 17-5-17, but it has a host of micronutrients. So I'm trying to compare that with how it was producing in earlier times.
Okay.
And we are getting exceptional production, especially from these varieties that weren't as winter affected. You can sort of see there's a lot of bees in here flying around. You can see the fruit starting to come. So it's none of this is ripe yet, but give it a few weeks and we'll be eating raspberries nicely. So.
Excellent. We did have a question online.
Okay.
Is there a difference in taste of each variety?
Yes, each variety is different. Nova has been the popular one, and we included that one in the trial because it's high yielding and people like the quality, the taste of it.
Okay.
You know, there are different sweetness levels. In general, last year we didn't find the sweetness was very high in the raspberries, and it depends on how much sunlight they get and those sorts of things, so it fluctuates. Red Bounty and Red Mammoth are very well liked as well. Prelude is new, so most of the commercial producers don't have Prelude yet, but in my estimation it is very comparable with the best varieties.
Okay.
Yeah. And I'm sort of recommending Prelude to most of my commercial growers for a new cultivar to try.
Okay.
Yeah. So, yeah.
And there's...
These ones were from the University of Saskatchewan, I should say. They're SK Red Bounty and SK Red Mammoth. So there's a fruit breeding program at the University of Saskatchewan led by Dr. Bob Boers, and they had produced raspberries earlier on, and so these were released, I'm not sure, it's after post-1999, in between that time and now. And so as I say, it started off as just a few plants, and then they had to run it through tissue culture propagation to get it so that it could be sold in the volumes that commercial growers need. So it's still relatively new to the market.
And then we have have like 4 rows here, does that just mean everything's replicated?
Yeah, I was trying to create a random control block design, so RCBD or whatever, and so each variety is in one plot, and then they're randomized in the 4 different rows. That's just so that there isn't bias in the way that the field is or whatever to give an advantage to one cultivar. Although it's a small plot area, so I don't know.
Right.
Probably not going to see much.
All right.
Yeah, so I think that's it for this. I don't know if there's any other questions.
There is one other question here. Have you
Okay.
been irrigating this year?
Yes, we have been irrigating. We have just a simple irrigation line running from the front, and we do it a couple times a week. Part of this trial originally was we were using tensiometers. So tensiometers are soil probes that you put in the ground, and they tell you how dry it's getting, and we had them at 6 inches and 18 inches. And so what you'd find is at 6 inches it tended to move up and down a lot more because the sunlight is evapotranspirating water out of, you know, that upper layer. But the 18-inch zone is less susceptible to that evapotranspiration, so it tended to be more consistent in the water that was down there. Raspberries aren't that susceptible to those fluctuations because they do have deeper roots, but the strawberries are certainly more susceptible to that, where they're more shallow rooted. So if you don't have that consistent watering, they can dry out, and it affects your yield and the viability of the plants. So, last year was a very dry year, so we definitely had to irrigate, and we've continued to irrigate this year as well.
Okay.
So,
Excellent. I think that's probably it.
That's it
So
for the
maybe
record.
we can sign off, and we'll meet you guys at the next plot.